How's it going, guys? Tony here. Today, we're going to review Earthworm Jim on the Sega Genesis. I absolutely love this game. When this game was announced on the Sega Genesis Mini, I was so pumped up. So we're going to see if it's worthy or not of being on the Sega Genesis Mini. Alright guys, please subscribe to me if you haven't already. That's going to put you in my contest for a Sega Genesis Mini giveaway. So let's get right into Earthworm Jim. Thanks for watching, guys. Earthworm Jim on the Sega Genesis. When Sega announced that they were putting this on the Mini, I was so excited. I hadn't played this game since the 90s, and this is a perfect example of a 90s video game. Now, I actually had to go out of my way to order this game because I didn't own it on the Sega Genesis. I have it on the Super Nintendo, but I've always heard that the Sega Genesis version is a lot better. And after spending a little bit of time with the Sega version and actually going and playing the Super Nintendo version, I actually agree with that statement. Today we're actually going to see if this game belongs on the Sega Genesis Mini, in some of its good qualities and some of its bad qualities. So let's check it out. Does Earthworm Jim belong on the Sega Genesis Mini? I'm just going to say flat out 100% yes. This screams 1990s. And I think that's what Sega was going for, was the 90s appeal, the nostalgia appeal of the 90s. And they picked a great game to represent that. And to me, this game, I loved the cartoon back in the day. I love this game. And it just screams that weird, zany 90s comedic feel. Cartoons like Ren and Stimpy, for example, and you'll have so much fun with it. It's a fun game on top of that, on top of all the nostalgia and the weirdness and the zaniness, and there's a lot to like here. So we'll get into that here in a minute. So absolutely yes, and also you're going to have some variety. And again, this is a prime example of a good Sega Genesis game that needed to be on the Mini. So let's get into the good. The good. What is so good about Earthworm Jim? First and foremost, I gotta say I love the character. He's a prime example of a 90s mascot character done well. I love all the abilities that he can do. I love the suit. I love that it's an earthworm controlling a suit. It's just so bizarre. The concept alone is just so bizarre. And Jim, he can actually use his head as a whip or as a helicopter propeller, and he has his blaster too, his handy blaster with some power-ups. And he does have some catchphrases, but they're not overused here. And very enjoyable just playing as Jim. I love all the abilities, all the things that he can do. And also the enemy design. The enemy design is very creative for its time, and the animation is stunning. The animation of Jim, the animation of the enemies is absolutely stunning. And yes, this is a later Genesis title. And also you can look at Earthworm Jim 2. That's another good example of some animation done right and just absolutely breathtaking. I also really like the soundtrack here too. And for some reason, I enjoy the Sega Genesis soundtrack a lot better than the Super Nintendo version. It just has that Genesis grit that isn't as refined as the Super Nintendo. I think you'll really enjoy the level design in this game. And there's also different kinds of levels. There's a variety here. So you're going to enjoy that as well. The boss battles, man, they're so much fun. They're so wacky. They're so bizarre. And you'll figure out the pattern pretty quickly, but I really enjoy going through the boss battles, and it's just a different kind of platformer, a different kind of side scroller, and that's great. That's, again, some more variety on the Sega Genesis Mini. So I think you will thoroughly enjoy Earthworm Jim. If you have never played through Earthworm Jim, you've got to give it a try, especially if you are a fan of the 90s or you grew up in the 90s and you missed out on this one. So let's move on to the bad. To be completely honest with you guys, this is a pretty solid game for me. This is another one of those 9.5 out of 10 games. So I'm not going to have a whole lot of issues with it. Now, there's some slight annoyances, just like any game. Okay, even in some of my favorite games, I have slight annoyances with. And there is no such thing as a perfect game. So with Earthworm Jim, some minor complaints I have. Basically, there's not enough ammo to go around. And yeah, you just saw me pick up some ammo, but it just seems like I'm continually just running out of ammo. Maybe that's just a playstyle thing. Maybe that's just me not being super great at this game. But I just keep running out of ammo. Also, the difficulty. At some points in this game, I struggle. But again, with practice, if you keep playing, you're going to be just fine. And I think this is a prime example of a excellent platforming 90s game. It just epitomizes the 90s so well. The style, the humor, the crudeness. And I really think you're going to have a really, really good time playing through this and have a nostalgia trip. So let's talk about my childhood memories, speaking of nostalgia. So let's get right to that. I really don't have any memories from my childhood of Earthworm Jim. So at the time this game came out in 1994, 1995, that's kind of when I stopped playing my Sega Genesis so much. And I started focusing in on RPGs on the Super Nintendo. I was obsessed with RPGs on the Super Nintendo, and eventually I'd move on to the PlayStation 1. Now, I did rent this game a ton, but I was not obsessed with it like I was with Sonic or Mario. The one thing I do remember the most with Earthworm Jim is the cartoon. Oddly enough, it didn't run that long, and it wasn't that popular, and nobody at school when I was a kid was talking about that particular cartoon. It was either Sonic or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Power Rangers or something like that. Never Earthworm Jim. But I think you guys will have a great time with this one, playing through it. It's an awesome game. Again, I can't say enough about the art style and just how gorgeous this game looks and feels. In conclusion, Earthworm Jim does belong on the Sega Genesis Mini. It's a great example of a 90s game done right and using a mascot in the correct way. You'll have a ton of fun going through the levels and just seeing all the strange and bizarre things, all the strange enemies, and there's also a good variety of levels here. Were you obsessed with Earthworm Jim back in the 90s? Do you think this game belongs on the Sega Genesis Mini? Also guys, please subscribe to me. That's going to put you in the running for a Sega Genesis Mini that I'm giving away at the end of the month. Alright guys, thank you for watching. Hope you're enjoying this series and enjoy the rest of this footage. Have a great rest of your day.